You have no proof I took anything. See you in court. My name is Holger. I'm 49 years old and I built Dravenmark Capital from the ground up in Kansas City, Missouri. Spent 23 years turning a one-room office into a regional investment firm with 37 employees. That text message from Sarah came in at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, 2 hours after I'd fired her for embezzling over $50,000 from our client accounts. The confidence in her words made my stomach turn. She actually believed she'd covered her tracks well enough to threaten me with a lawsuit. Wrongful termination, her lawyer would claim. Discrimination, maybe. All the usual plays people make when they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar. I'd been watching the numbers for weeks. Small discrepancies at first. 1,000 here, 1,500 there. The kind of amounts that could slip by if you weren't paying attention. But I've been paying attention to every dollar that moves through this company since I opened the doors in 2001. You don't survive in this business by being careless with other people's money. Sarah had worked for us for 6 years. Started as a junior accountant, worked her way up to senior financial analyst. Smart woman. Reliable. Or so I thought. She handled the quarterly reports, managed several smaller client portfolios, had access to the systems she needed to do her job well. I trusted her. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was not acting sooner when I noticed her lifestyle upgrades. New car last spring. Designer clothes. Weekend trips to Chicago and Denver that seemed expensive for someone making $68,000 a year. When I asked about it casually, she mentioned an inheritance from her grandmother. Seemed reasonable enough. But inheritances don't typically come in monthly installments. Ralph, my forensic accountant, had been working through the records for the past month. Quiet investigation. No accusations until we had everything documented. Ralph's thorough like that. Former FBI white-collar crime investigator who started his own consulting firm 5 years ago. When I called him about the discrepancies, he didn't ask questions, just said he'd take a look. What he found was worse than I'd imagined. $53,427. Taken over 18 months. Always small amounts. Always from accounts of clients who didn't check their statements closely. Elderly investors. Busy executives who relied on us to handle the details. She'd been stealing from people who trusted us. People who trusted me. The worst part wasn't the money. We carry insurance for theft. The worst part was realizing I'd missed it for so long, that she'd been sitting in meetings with me, discussing client portfolios, making recommendations for their financial futures, while systematically robbing them blind. Now she wanted to take me to court. I started Dravenmark Capital in 2001 with $12,000 and a dream of building something that mattered. My dad had been a machinist his whole life, never trusted banks or investment firms, called them legal thieves. Maybe he wasn't entirely wrong, but I wanted to prove that some of us were different, that you could make money and sleep well at night. The early years were brutal. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I did everything myself. Client meetings, paperwork, filing, even cleaned the office on weekends. My ex-wife Lauren couldn't handle it, said I cared more about the business than our marriage. She wasn't wrong, but building something from nothing requires sacrifice. She left in 2006, took half of what little I had, but I kept building. Sarah joined us in 2018. Fresh out of college with an accounting degree from the University of Missouri. Eager, hardworking, asked good questions. I liked her immediately. She reminded me of myself at that age, hungry, determined, willing to learn. I became something of a mentor to her. That's what made this betrayal cut so deep. Over the years, I'd given her increasing responsibility, client presentations, portfolio management, even brought her to the annual partners meeting last year. I was grooming her for a management position, had plans to make her a junior partner by the time she turned 30. The warning signs were subtle at first. Little inconsistencies in her reports that didn't add up. Times when client accounts showed activity that didn't match our transaction records. I'd ask her about it, and she always had an explanation. System glitches, processing delays, banking errors that would be corrected next month. I wanted to believe her. That was the problem. My business partner, Gregory, had raised concerns about Sarah's spending habits last fall. Expensive purse at the office party, new jewelry, the BMW she bought to replace her Honda. Gregory's more suspicious than I am. Comes from growing up in Chicago, he says. Everyone's running some kind of angle. I defended Sarah, told Gregory he was being paranoid. People were allowed to spend their money however they wanted. Maybe she was good at saving. Maybe she had other income sources, side consulting work, stock investments that paid off. But when the inheritance story changed from grandmother to great-aunt to distant cousin over the course of 3 conversations, I knew something was wrong. People don't forget who left them money. That's when I called Ralph. Ralph had done forensic work for us once before, when a former employee claimed we'd shorted his commission payments. False accusation, but Ralph proved it quickly and thoroughly. No drama, no courtroom theatrics, just facts and documentation that ended the dispute before it became expensive. I needed facts now, not suspicions, not gut feelings, facts that would hold up in court, because I had a feeling we were heading there. Ralph called me at 7 a.m. on a Monday morning in October. I was in my office early as usual, going through the weekend reports when my phone rang. "We need to meet," he said. "Bring Gregory, and maybe call your lawyer." The tone in his voice told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't going to be good news. We met at Ralph's office downtown. He had printouts spread across a conference table like pieces of a puzzle. Bank statements, transaction logs, client account histories. 18 months of evidence laid out in chronological order. "She's been moving money through a series of microtransactions," Ralph explained, pointing to highlighted entries. Small amounts from dormant accounts, redirected through a shell company she created, then transferred to her personal banking. Very sophisticated operation. Gregory whistled low. 50 grand? $53,427, Ralph said. "That we can prove. Could be more in accounts we haven't audited yet." I stared at the papers, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just a kind of hollow recognition that I'd been played. That someone I'd trusted, someone I'd invested in, had been stealing from our clients for over a year. "The shell company," I said. "When was it formed?" Ralph flipped through the documents. "March 2023. 3 months after you gave her access to the portfolio management system." That hit like a punch to the gut. She'd started planning this theft almost immediately after I'd promoted her. All those conversations about her career goals, her appreciation for the opportunities I'd given her, her excitement about becoming a partner someday. All lies. "There's more," Ralph continued. "She's been careful about which accounts to target. Elderly clients who don't check statements regularly. Business accounts for clients who are too busy to notice small discrepancies. She studied their patterns before she started taking their money." Gregory shook his head. "Calculated." "Very calculated," Ralph agreed. "This wasn't desperation or a moment of weakness. This was a deliberate long-term plan to defraud your clients." I sat back in my chair, processing the magnitude of what Sarah had done. Not just to me, but to people who'd trusted us with their life savings. Retirement funds, college accounts, money that represented years of hard work and careful saving. She'd stolen their futures piece by piece while smiling at them during quarterly reviews. "What do we do now?" Gregory asked. I looked at the evidence spread across the table. Documentation that would destroy Sarah's life if we chose to use it. End her career. Send her to prison. Ruin any chance she had of rebuilding. "We fire her," I said. "Today. Clean out her desk, revoke her system access, escort her from the building. Then we call the police." "She's going to deny everything," Gregory warned. "Let her," I said. "Ralph's got the proof." I had no idea how right Gregory would be about her denials, or how confidently she'd try to turn the tables on us. I called Sarah into my office at 2 p.m. that Tuesday. Gregory was there as a witness along with Janet from Human Resources. Standard procedure for terminations, though this wasn't standard at all. Sarah walked in with her usual confidence. Professional smile, tablet in hand, ready for what she assumed was a routine meeting. She'd always been good at projecting competence. Have a seat, I said. She did, crossing her legs and looking expectant. What's on the agenda today? Your employment with Dravenmark Capital is terminated, effective immediately, I said. We're prepared to discuss the circumstances if you'd like, but the decision is final. The smile faded. What, Holger, what are you talking about? We've discovered irregularities in several client accounts under your management, Gregory said. Significant irregularities. Sarah's face went through a series of micro-expressions, confusion, then calculation, then a kind of controlled panic. I don't understand. What kind of irregularities? Missing funds, I said. $53,427 to be precise. That's impossible, she said quickly. If there are discrepancies, they're system errors, banking delays. I can explain every transaction in those accounts. Janet handed her a termination letter and a box. You'll need to pack your personal belongings and surrender your access cards and company equipment. Sarah stared at the letter without reading it. You're making a mistake, a huge mistake. I've never taken anything that didn't belong to me. We have documentation, I said. What documentation? Show me. That's not going to happen, Gregory said. Legal will handle any questions about evidence. Sarah stood up, her professional composure cracking. This is insane. I've given 6 years of my life to this company. 6 years. And you're firing me based on what, some accounting errors? Pack your things, I said. She looked at me with something approaching betrayal in her eyes, as if I was the one who'd broken trust. You know what, Holger? Fine. Pack my things, walk me out like a criminal. But you haven't heard the last of this. 2 hours later, I got the text message. You have no proof I took anything. See you in court. The confidence in those words bothered me more than the threat itself. She genuinely believed she could beat this. Either she was delusional, or she knew something I didn't. Wednesday morning brought a call from an attorney named Douglas Pierce. Expensive voice, downtown address, the kind of lawyer who charges by the minute for phone calls. Mr. Holger, I represent Sarah Williams regarding her wrongful termination from your firm. My client was dismissed without cause and without following proper procedures. We're prepared to file suit unless this matter can be resolved quickly. She was terminated for theft, I said. Alleged theft, Pierce corrected. My client denies any wrongdoing. More importantly, she's informed me that her dismissal may have been motivated by her recent complaints about workplace harassment and discrimination. That stopped me cold. What complaints? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details over the phone, but I'm sure you understand the seriousness of these allegations. My client is prepared to file with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in addition to pursuing wrongful termination damages. I felt the ground shifting under my feet. This wasn't just about the money anymore. Sarah was trying to turn herself into the victim, paint me as the aggressor, use the legal system to hide her crimes behind a shield of civil rights violations. Your client stole over $50,000 from our client accounts, I said. That's a very serious accusation to make without proof, Pierce replied smoothly. I hope you have documentation to support such claims. My client certainly doesn't. After he hung up, I sat in my office staring at the phone. Sarah wasn't just denying the theft. She was actively building a defense strategy that would make me look like the criminal. Harassment, discrimination, wrongful termination, all designed to muddy the waters and create reasonable doubt. It was brilliant in a sociopathic way. I called Ralph. She's hired Douglas Pierce, I told him. Ralph was quiet for a moment. Pierce is good. Expensive, but good. This just got more complicated. How complicated? The kind where we need to be absolutely certain about our evidence before we proceed. Pierce doesn't take cases he can't win. Ralph worked through the night, double-checking every piece of evidence we had. When he called the next morning, his voice was grim. We need to meet. Bring Gregory and definitely bring your lawyer this time. This time we met at my attorney's office. Tom Bradley had been handling legal matters for Dravenmark Capital since 2007. Conservative approach, methodical, never promised more than he could deliver. If Tom looked worried, I knew we had problems. Walk me through what you found. Tom said to Ralph. Ralph spread out the documents again, but this time, I noticed gaps. Missing transaction records, incomplete paper trails, evidence that should have been ironclad but wasn't. The problem is digital forensics, Ralph explained. Sarah was smart enough to cover her tracks in the system. She deleted transaction logs, modified backup files, even corrupted some of the archived data. What we have is strong circumstantial evidence, but Pierce is going to argue that missing money doesn't prove theft. What about the shell company? Gregory asked. That's where it gets interesting, Ralph said. The company exists, but it's not registered under her name. It's registered under the name of her boyfriend, someone called Jake Morrison. If Sarah claims she didn't know about the company, or that Morrison was acting independently, it creates reasonable doubt. Tom leaned back in his chair. So we can prove money went missing, and we can prove it ended up in an account connected to her boyfriend. But we can't definitively prove she personally authorized the transfers. Exactly, Ralph said. And there's something else. I did some background checking on Pierce. He specializes in employment law, specifically cases involving financial institutions accused of retaliation against whistleblowers. I felt my stomach drop. Whistleblowers? Sarah's building a narrative where she discovered irregularities in client accounts, reported them internally, and was fired for asking too many questions. Pierce will argue that you terminated her to prevent her from exposing larger problems within the firm. That's insane, Gregory said. She's the one who stole the money. But can we prove it in court? Tom asked. Beyond a reasonable doubt? Ralph was quiet for a long moment. With what we have now, it would be close. Too close for comfort. I stared at the conference table, feeling everything I'd built over 23 years hanging in the balance. Sarah had planned this better than I'd realized. Not just the theft, but the cover-up, the legal strategy, the public relations nightmare of being accused of retaliating against a whistleblower. There has to be something else, I said. Some way to prove what really happened. Ralph nodded slowly. There might be, but it's going to take time, and it's going to require resources, more forensic investigation, digital recovery of deleted files, maybe even surveillance of Sarah and her boyfriend to see if they're still moving money. How much time? Tom asked. Weeks, maybe months. And how much will it cost? I asked. Ralph named a figure that made Gregory wince. But there's another option, he continued. We could settle, pay Sarah's legal fees, give her a severance package, make this go away quietly. It would be cheaper than a prolonged legal battle. I thought about that for exactly 3 seconds. No. Holger, Tom warned. This could get very expensive, very public, and very messy. Even if we win, the damage to your reputation could be significant. She stole from our clients, I said. From people who trusted us with their life savings. I'm not paying her to walk away. Then we fight, Ralph said. But we do it smart. No more confrontations. No more public statements. We gather evidence, build an airtight case, and let the facts speak for themselves. How do we start? I asked. Ralph smiled for the first time that day. We finish what we started, but this time, we don't give her any warning. Ralph's plan was methodical and quiet. No dramatic confrontations, no public accusations, just careful, systematic investigation designed to uncover the truth Sarah thought she'd buried. The first step was digital forensics. Ralph brought in a specialist from Denver, a former NSA analyst who understood how to recover deleted data from corrupted systems. It took 2 weeks, but they managed to reconstruct most of the transaction logs Sarah had deleted. The recovered data was damning. Not just the stolen money, but the planning that went into it. Sarah had researched each target account thoroughly before making withdrawals. She'd studied client patterns, identified optimal timing for transfers, even calculated how long she could steal from each account before the discrepancies would be noticed. But Ralph wasn't satisfied with digital evidence alone. He wanted human intelligence. Jake Morrison is the weak link, he explained during one of our weekly strategy meetings. 26 years old, no previous business experience. suddenly operating a consulting company that's received $53,000 in mysterious payments. He's not a criminal mastermind. He's a patsy. What do you want to do? I asked. I want to talk to him. Not officially, not as part of any investigation, just a conversation between businessmen about his consulting services. Ralph's approach was brilliant in its simplicity. He contacted Morrison's shell company about potentially hiring them for financial consulting services. Morrison, eager for legitimate business, agreed to a meeting at a coffee shop in downtown Kansas City. Ralph recorded the conversation. Morrison had no idea who Ralph really was, and no idea that his girlfriend was facing embezzlement charges. When Ralph asked about the company's previous clients and revenue sources, Morrison was surprisingly forthcoming. Most of our income has come from one client, Morrison admitted. Financial services work. My girlfriend Sarah set it up. She said her company needed to outsource some accounting functions, and she recommended us for the contract. What kind of accounting functions? Ralph asked. Asset transfers mostly, moving money between different investment accounts for their clients. She said it was routine portfolio management, but they needed an external company to handle it for regulatory compliance. Morrison had no idea he was confessing to money laundering. He genuinely believed he was running a legitimate consulting business, helping Dravenmark Capital with regulatory compliance. Sarah had convinced him that the stolen money was legitimate payment for services rendered. When Ralph played me the recording, I felt a mix of anger and satisfaction. Anger at how thoroughly Sarah had manipulated everyone around her. Satisfaction that we finally had the smoking gun we needed. But the best evidence came from an unexpected source. Sarah herself. 2 weeks after our meeting with Morrison, Sarah made a crucial mistake. She tried to access the Dravenmark Capital computer system remotely, using login credentials that should have been deactivated when we fired her. Our IT security system flagged the attempted breach immediately. More importantly, it traced the access attempt to Sarah's home IP address and logged exactly which files she tried to access, the same client accounts she'd been stealing from. Why would she try to access those accounts if she wasn't involved in the theft? Ralph asked rhetorically. Innocent employees don't hack into their former employers' systems to check on clients they supposedly never stole from. Tom reviewed all the evidence, the recovered transaction logs, Morrison's recorded confession, the attempted system breach, and the paper trail connecting the shell company to Sarah's personal finances. This is enough, he said finally. More than enough. Pierce is going to have a very difficult time explaining away this much evidence. What's our next move? I asked. Tom smiled. We call Pierce and invite him to review our documentation. Then we watch Sarah's lawsuit disappear. Tom called Douglas Pierce on a Friday afternoon in November. I was in Tom's office listening on speakerphone as he laid out our evidence in precise, methodical detail. We have recovered transaction logs showing systematic theft over 18 months, Tom said. We have recorded admissions from the owner of the shell company that received the stolen funds. We have attempted computer intrusion by your client targeting the same accounts she allegedly never touched, and we have documentary evidence linking the shell company directly to your client's personal finances. Pierce was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its earlier confidence. I'll need to review this evidence with my client. Of course, Tom said. We're prepared to share everything with the appropriate authorities. The FBI has a dedicated white-collar crime unit here in Kansas City. I'm sure they'll be very interested in the sophistication of this operation. That won't be necessary, Pierce said quickly. Let me talk to Sarah and get back to you. The call ended. Tom looked at me across his desk. He's going to drop the case. How can you be sure? Because Pierce is too smart to take a losing case to trial, and this is definitely a losing case. Pierce called back Monday morning. My client has decided not to pursue legal action at this time. What about the harassment and discrimination claims? Tom asked. Those allegations appear to have been based on misunderstandings. My client wishes to move forward with her career and put this matter behind her. I assume that means she's withdrawing all claims against Dravenmark Capital? That's correct. Tom ended the call and looked at me. It's over. But I wasn't satisfied with just making the lawsuit disappear. Sarah had stolen from our clients. She'd tried to destroy my reputation and my business. She'd manipulated her boyfriend into becoming an unwitting accomplice in money laundering. Someone needed to face consequences for all of that. I called the FBI. Special Agent Helen Foster met with me the following Wednesday. She reviewed Ralph's evidence, listened to Morrison's recorded confession, and examined the documentation Tom had prepared for Sarah's defense team. "This is a solid case," she said. "Wire fraud, money laundering, computer intrusion. Your forensic accountant did excellent work. What happens now? We'll need to interview witnesses, gather additional evidence, present the case to a federal prosecutor. If charges are filed, your client accounts will be considered victims of the crime, which means they'll be eligible for restitution through the criminal justice system. How long will that take? Months, probably. But based on what I'm seeing here, I'd say charges are very likely." Sarah was arrested 3 weeks later at her apartment in Overland Park. The FBI executed search warrants simultaneously at her home, Morrison's apartment, and the office space he'd rented for his consulting company. They recovered computers, financial records, and additional evidence of the money laundering operation. Morrison cooperated immediately, providing testimony about Sarah's role in setting up the shell company and directing the financial transactions. He received immunity in exchange for his cooperation. Sarah's new attorney negotiated a plea agreement, 18 months in federal prison, full restitution to the affected clients, and 5 years of supervised probation. She would also be permanently barred from working in the financial services industry. The local business journal ran a small article about the case. "Investment firm employee pleads guilty to embezzlement." It mentioned that Dravenmark Capital had discovered the theft through internal auditing procedures and had cooperated fully with federal investigators. I framed that article and hung it in my office. Not because I was proud of what happened, but because I wanted to remember that trust, once broken, has consequences. The whole ordeal taught me that sometimes the people you try to help are the ones most likely to hurt you. Sarah served her full sentence and was released in early 2026. Morrison's consulting company was dissolved, and he moved back to his hometown in Nebraska, where he found work at his father's hardware store. Douglas Pierce quietly stopped representing employment law cases, focusing instead on personal injury litigation, where the moral lines were clearer. Ralph's forensic accounting firm gained a reputation for thoroughness that brought him new clients across the Midwest. Building something honest in a dishonest world requires constant vigilance, but it's still worth doing.